We all like to think of ourselves as people of integrity, with a pretty solid moral compass. But what if that sense of self is, well, a lot more fragile than we imagine? What if it could be completely reshaped by a single, tiny choice? Today, we're going to dive into this powerful psychological force called cognitive dissonance, and we'll look at it through the lens of something called the pyramid of choice.
It sounds a little dramatic, doesn't it? But really, think about it. Can one small action, a decision you make in a split second, actually set you on a path that fundamentally changes who you are and what you believe? Let's unpack that question with a story. So, let's meet Robert and Victor. For our story, just imagine they're identical in every way that matters. Intellectually, morally, they're both smart, they work hard, and they both firmly believe that cheating is just plain wrong. They're about to take this huge exam, the kind that could make or break their future careers. They're essentially the same person, standing at the very same starting line.
Now, during the exam, both of them hit a wall. There's a question they just can't answer. The panic starts to creep in. And then, an opportunity. A quick, easy glance at a neighbor's paper. Right here, at the very peak of this psychological pyramid, they have to make a choice. And after a moment of really intense internal struggle, Robert gives in. He cheats. But Victor, he grits his teeth and resists. At that moment, their actions are separated by the thinnest possible margin, a millimeter.
Okay, fast forward just 1 week. The change is absolutely staggering. Robert is now arguing that, cheating isn't really a big deal. He calls it a necessary risk in this competitive dog-eat-dog world. But Victor, on the other hand, has become even more rigid. He's insisting that cheating is a total disgrace and anyone who does it should be expelled. They started just a millimeter apart, but now they've slid to completely opposite ends of the pyramid. So how on earth did that happen?
The engine driving this huge change is called cognitive dissonance. It's that really intense, uncomfortable feeling we get when our actions clash with our beliefs. It's almost like a programming error in our brain. An action, cheating, conflicts with a core belief. I'm an honest person, and the system flags an error. That tension just screams to be resolved.
And this isn't just some vague feeling, It's a really clear, predictable process. First, you do something that goes against a core belief. For Robert, he cheated, but he still thinks he's an honest guy. Second, that creates that awful psychological discomfort. The error code starts flashing. So third, the brain, which just hates that kind of unresolved tension, immediately runs a program to fix the inconsistency.
So what's the mind's go-to software for fixing this problem? Well, it's not changing the behavior. That's already done. It's much easier to change the belief. This program was called self-justification. To get rid of that tension, Robert's mind doesn't go, "Oh, I guess I'm dishonest." Nope. Instead, it concludes, you know what? Cheating isn't that dishonest. He literally rewrites his own moral code.
What's so wild about this is that the process isn't about finding the logical truth at all. As the social psychologist Elliot Aronson found, it's all about protecting our self-concept. The dissonance really kicks into high gear when we get clear evidence that we aren't the good, smart, or capable person we want to believe we are. So justification is basically just a defense mechanism for our ego.
And this is where it gets really dangerous, because this isn't just a one-and-done fix. Every time we justify our actions, it makes the next, maybe slightly bigger, unethical act that much easier to rationalize. It's what psychologists call a process of entrapment, a spiral that can lead us to places we never, ever thought we would go. A classic real-world example of this is Jeb Magruder, who was an aide in the Watergate scandal. He didn't just wake up one morning and decide to become a criminal. It started with really small justifications, like excusing his boss's abrasive behavior. Well, that led to excusing unethical acts. And then, before he knew it, he was accepting illegal ones. He later admitted, with a lot of bitterness, that somewhere along that chain of justifications, he just completely lost his moral compass.
This process perfectly explains the mechanism behind those famous Milgram obedience experiments. People didn't just walk in and agree to deliver a 450-volt shock. Of course not. They started at 15 volts. Then they justified going up to 30 because, hey, what's another 15 volts? Each tiny, justified step made the next one seem logical, trapping them in a course of action that they would have found absolutely horrifying from the start.
Okay, let's get back to our story for a second. Let's see what happens when you reach the bottom of that pyramid. Robert and Victor, who started out so alike, are now living in completely different moral universes. And each one built that universe themselves, brick by brick, with their own self-justification. Once they're at these opposite corners, they develop a huge psychological blind spot. It's called naive realism. And it's this deeply ingrained, almost totally unconscious belief that I see the world objectively, exactly as it is. Which means, of course, that anyone who disagrees with me, like Robert and Victor now see each other, well, they must be biased, or irrational, or just plain dumb. There's no room for common ground, because each one is convinced that their view is reality.
And here's the really crucial point. What started as one single act now defines two completely separate, irreconcilable realities. For Robert, cheating is a gray area. It's a tool you use to survive. For Victor, it's a black and white offense, a betrayal of principle. They can't even have a real conversation about it anymore, because they're literally running on different moral software.
So you might be wondering, why would our brains even be built this way? The biologist Robert Trivers had a theory. He argued that this self-justification mechanism is really a form of self-deception. See, if you can genuinely convince yourself that what you did was justified, you become a much more convincing liar to other people. In a way, our mind's incredible capacity for self-deception isn't a bug, it's a feature.
So all of this leaves us with a pretty unsettling question, doesn't it? The first step to resisting this whole process is just awareness. It's recognizing that pull of self-justification when it starts happening. The goal isn't to be perfect, no one is. It's just to be more mindful of the stories we tell ourselves. So I'll leave you with this to think about. What small choices are you justifying today, and on what pyramid do you currently stand?